The Sex Ed with Tim podcast is recorded on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands.
You're listening to Sex Ed with Tim.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sex Ed with Tim podcast. I'm your host, Tim, certified sex educator, your local chaotic homosexual, and I have a fantasy where I push a boulder up a hill over and over again. You know what that's called? Forced sissification.
Perfect.
I feel like that was a very pity laugh, Wiley.
It was good. It's good because I heard the punchline the first time, and this time I heard the joke with it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is good.
Okay, great. I hope that's not too niche or anything for my listeners. My chlamydiates, as I call them. My chlamydia hive. Oh my goodness. So speaking of my dear chlamydiates, to the audience out there, to the virtual space that is here with us today, that very beautiful laugh you hear on the other end of the mic is kink and sex educator and just all around very hot. This is Mistress Wiley Wolfe with me on the show today. Mistress Wiley Wolfe, hello, how are you doing?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and talking to you.
I am so glad that we've connected. I always love connecting with fellow sex kink educators because we're like cut from the same cloth. We're very like, you know, horny and slutty, and
have to.
And we're just like the coolest, chillest. And for whatever reason, I think just the moment you become like a sex educator, you're just hot. And
it does come with the job description. So
yeah, so if you're ugly, don't go into sex education. I'm sorry.
Or do, because then you'll just become hot, and then that's great. And I think everyone's hot in some way, right? You just have to find what's hot about yourself and learn to boost that. And it's a great way of becoming more into what makes you sexy.
That is true, because when you're teaching sex, you're teaching about confidence, and nothing is hotter than confidence.
So true.
I love it when like even nerdy kind of sexy, like those shy kind of sexy kind of cute things, and then they get like all up in their feelings, and then they start to like come out of their shell. Oh my God, I'm so wet just thinking about it.
That's so sexy.
It is. So, Mistress Wiley Wolfe, I'm gonna like address you by your entire title, Mistress Wiley Wolfe.
Whatever you want. It doesn't really matter.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, I do love calling dominatrices on my show Mistress and like whatever is there. Like,
heck yeah, then do it. I love that.
Okay, I love it. So, Mistress Wiley Wolfe, can you please do a little introduction about yourself for our chlamydiates out there?
Absolutely. So, of course, by now you know my name, Mistress Wiley Wolfe. I am a professional and lifestyle dominatrix in Los Angeles. My pronouns are she, they. I am genderqueer. I am also a fetish performer, BDSM educator, now everywhere all over the US and Canada at this point, which is fun. I'm also a human animal handler and a polyamorous leather daddy. I have been doing my professional work for around 7 years now, something like that. And I've also been teaching for quite a number of years. I think it's probably like 4 at this point, maybe more than that. I'm also a community organizer. So in my local community, I run like a pet play organization, which is a lot of fun. I've done primal organizations before. I also run like an immersive theater, intense, extreme kink experience that happens like once or twice a year, kind of a little bit of everything. But yeah, sadist, daddy, leather, craziness. That is how I would describe myself.
Oh my God.
Queer bullshit. Great.
I love that. That's like so multi-hyphenate of you and just filling in all the different hats. Oh, that's amazing. So I'm still kind of fixated on the fact they said human animal handler, and I'm like, wait, well, can you clarify that?
Most certainly, yeah. So in like pet play, that's, for those who don't know, that's basically a form of role play where, in its most basic form, we could go in more into it, but like, let's go to its most basic form. One person is role playing as an animal, let's say a puppy or a dog, and the other person is role playing as their handler. So if you just imagine somebody who owns a dog, one person's that dog and one person's the one who owns them. I'm the one who owns them.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love getting owned. Or like, I love just like the role play of it all. The whole like childlike, I'm not childish, childlike imagination, but like you get the adult reward of it. And it's so good. So you said you're teaching across the United States and parts of Canada. What are you teaching?
I teach all kinds of things. So I've got a pretty growing list of classes, let's say. I teach a daddy class, helping all people find their inner daddy, but kind of with a queer focused lens, since that's how I'm coming to it. I always have to like warn people that it is, everyone can come and everyone can get something out of it, but it is absolutely like a queer daddy focused class. In the same sort of vein, I teach how to use belts. And when I say straps, I mean like belt straps, although I suppose I could teach about the other kind of strap too if I wanted to. But like belt impact, belt bondage, all the different kinds of things with that. It's a big part of my play. I teach about animal role play and pet play in a lot of different ways, everything from handling to gender and sexuality related to that and more. I teach about primal play. I teach about stepping on people. So that's always kind of fun. That's one of my favorite things to do. I teach about wax play. I teach about spanking and domestic discipline, DS dynamics, negotiation and consent, all kinds of stuff. Probably more that I'm not thinking of right now.
Yeah. I mean, kink and fetish go like, it's a whole smorgasbord of like different types of play, right? So
yeah,
it's hard to,
yeah, it's easier to find what I don't like than what I do like. I like most.
So I was an escort from like the ages of 19 to 23. And I had some run-ins with clients who wanted me to engage in their kinks and fetishes. And, you know, I had to like educate myself on how to engage in their like fantasy correctly and safely. I do remember one very specific request, and I bring this up because you talk about stepping on people. A client asked me to gas pedal him, and yeah, I don't know if like we're thinking the same thing, but when he told me to gas pedal him, it was literally just like stepping on his cock with like increasing amounts of force over and over again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Got it. I haven't heard that term for it, but yes. Okay.
So I guess that's a relatively new term, or I don't know, but that's what the Doms here in Toronto have called it. So I'm like, oh, wow, that was like, I got scared, you know, because I don't really know how much pressure the cock could take. So I'm wondering about like your first foray into kink and BDSM and like your educational journey.
Well, first I'll speak to what you just said. The cock and balls can take a lot more than you think. Not everything. You can rupture things. That's not a go ahead for people to do whatever they want to theirs or other people's cock and balls. Okay, please don't misconstrue it as that. But you would be surprised, is what I'll say simply. Here, I would typically call that like part of ball busting is the word that like I would use. But I think whatever terms work for people is really fun, and I think that that's great. I have kicked people in the balls very hard, but it's something that you need to be very careful with. You can, of course, rupture things, but yeah, you'd be surprised.
I love that. You can be on Jackass or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about what they do, right? And they've had injuries also, so that's important to know. Bruising can happen, swelling can happen, so things like that definitely can happen. But in order to really like rupture one of your testicles, for example, you have to put a lot of force on that. Like you have to hit that with a hammer. So which you shouldn't be doing. Please don't do that. You want to be really careful, and I think a knowledge of anatomy is really important when you are topping in like a kink way, especially when you're doing things that are involving someone's body or involving someone's mind. So really, in any case, it's really important to do your research and understand like everyone's anatomy and where nerves are and all that kind of stuff. But with proper training, you can do quite a lot.
For sure. How did you like get to all of this knowledge?
Well, so I know that you asked like how I first got started. Yeah. So I can address all of that.
Sure.
I was asked to go to a party by a friend of mine. And at the time I was just kind of interested in gaining additional experiences. And I was really open to basically leaving places with like fun stories, essentially. So I went to this party, and it was at the end of the party and I hadn't done anything. And there were some taster booths. And for people who don't know what those are just pieces of furniture where there's somebody who is designated by the event to help people try stuff, right? So you can go up to them and be like, hey, I'd like to try getting spanked today. And like they've been like sort of hired or brought on by the event to do that for people in like a small increment of time. It's not like a full scene. It's usually like, I don't know, 5 to 15 minutes that you like just try stuff. And that can be a lot of fun. So I ended up doing that. I was not as ethical as I should have been. I did not tell that person it was my first time. I don't recommend you do this. Please always tell people where you're at in your journey. But I told that person to hit me with everything they got. So I got tied to St. Andrew's Cross and I got hit with everything they got. And I just remember looking through the St. Andrew's Cross as I'm like yelling and, going through all of this. And these people are just, sitting casually with their drinks as if it's the most normal thing in the world. Now I'm those people. But at the time, that really struck me. I was like, what is this place that I can be in such a state of endurance and intensity? And people are looking at it as if it's the most normal thing that's ever happened in the world. So I just thought that was really interesting. So after that, I found FetLife and did some exploring, got into the scene. I found some people that were willing to teach me different things, some friends who became kind of like mentors to me. And that was sort of the beginning of my lifestyle journey. As far as gaining more knowledge than that, a couple years later, I determined that I wanted to go professional. So I joined a house dungeon in my area. And a house dungeon there's basically a staff of professionals there, professional submissives, professional switches, professional dominants. And so you kind of do have a little bit of a community. There's pros and cons to doing that, but that's the route that I chose to take. And I ended up learning a lot through that. And then that sort of kickstarted both my professional career and my desire to learn more and more and more so I could be better as a professional and as a kinkster in general. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
That's amazing. And I feel like, whenever you speak to sex kink educators or whatever educator that is within this field, we all have a little similar story where, well, for mine, it was really more like my friend asked me on how to have anal. Like out of the blue. It was literally out of the blue. So I had just graduated from business school and I didn't know what to do. So I was like, you know what, let me just go on a vacation for a little bit. Went to New York, met up with one of my old friends there. She took me to a Starbucks. And as we sat down, literally like a non sequitur, she was just like, Tim, you're gay. How do I have anal? And I was like, oh, okay. First of all, I don't know if that's homophobic, but second of all, thank you so much for asking me that question because I know lots. Uh, and then
Yeah.
that just kind of like lit a fire under my ass. Like, oh, I actually like teaching about this kind of stuff. And then jump forward to now is where I ended up.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
It was so like that light bulb moment. It's like, oh, I can combine my knowledge of business and my knowledge of sex from escorting and combine it into this new career. And what I like about this is that I'm still learning different things. So like, for example, when you filled in that intake form, it never occurred to me that there was such a thing as cigar play.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering if you can speak on that.
Oh, absolutely. That is one of the cornerstones of one of my submissives and I's like dynamic is cigar play and cigar service specifically. And for me, it's also very connected to my identity as a daddy. You've got like that very like stereotypical draw, right? When you think of like this kind of hyper masculinized idea of like some guy with a cigar and like some whiskey saloon or whatever, like some whiskey bar. I mean,
the Hugh Hefner of it all.
Absolutely. Take that, queer the heck out of it, and I can reclaim that as sort of a celebration of my own masculinity and my own sort of daddy self, right? So that's a lot of fun. I really love that aesthetic. I love the smell. There's so much to learn within different cigars. You've got different types. You've got different scents. You've got different strength levels. You've got all the different sourcing, everything, right? And as far as like the play, it becomes a little bit like fireplay. So this everything that we do in kink is something that has an element of risk. Cigar play is no different. You have a lighted cigar. It's also a bigger flame than a lighted cigarette, let's say, right? Just because it's bigger. Cigar play can involve things such as blowing smoke all over somebody, right? There's actually a real intense sensuality of just blowing smoke across someone's body. You're playing with the warmth. You're playing with the temperature of a flame near the skin. Now, you're not putting the cherry, which is the lit part, on somebody's skin. You will burn them. You just will. So there's particular techniques to make sure that you're putting the heat near the skin, but in a safe way so that you're not actually rolling a burning hot cherry across their skin and burning them. Very important. Also be careful of body hair for similar reasons.
Yeah, you don't want to catch on fire.
We don't want to do that. It is an open flame ultimately. There's also a lot of ritual and high protocol that goes into simply the service around preparing a cigar. So in my submissive's case, she's learned all the different ways to prepare them, to get them wet. For me, that can be very sexually charged. It's a lot of fun because you have to pre-moisten the cigar before you cut it. So that's a lot of fun. And there's different ways to cut a cigar so that on the side that you smoke, and the different ways that you cut it are different types of experiences when you smoke it. So there's a lot to learn within that. There's a lot of ritual that goes into the preparation. There's different techniques to light the cigar. There's all different types of things that can create a sort of high protocol experience that also, in my case, not in everyone's case, but in my case, has sort of like a queer masculinity to it that I get to then use to sort of affirm my own gender in a way. You can also do this in a hyper femme way, and that's really cool too. You can do it in any way you want. I'm just speaking to it for me. You can have them hold it in different ways. There can be kind of breath play involved if you make somebody hold a cigarette or a cigar in their mouth. It's actually much harder than you'd think, just holding the side of it. And then, of course, we have all the ash, right? I know there's a lot to it. I'm just kind of skipping over things. But we have the ash as well. So ashing on somebody, using someone as an ashtray, the human furniture component, right?
That's
all kinds of things.
I mean, no pun intended. Yeah. That's so hot.
Very good. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. And I'm really just scratching the surface and skipping over things. But there can be quite a bit to it.
That's actually so interesting because that never occurred to me that can be part of the ritual of kink. And because like, honestly, when you typed out cigar play, I was like, okay, so that's simple as lighting a cigar and like just burning them. And I was like, okay, probably not.
In kink, nothing's that simple. What in kink is that simple?
Right, exactly. Right. I was like, okay, it's probably not. And that was just like my first impression of it. But hearing this now, I'm like, okay, that's very sexy. I the first time I ever smoked a cigar was like in 2016, and I was in the Dominican Republic. I had just graduated, and I didn't know how to smoke a cigar, and I fully like swallowed and inhaled all of that smoke.
Oh no. Yeah, you really have to puff it.
Yeah. I mean, nobody told me how to smoke a cigar because, like, I smoke joints so that, like, I swallow the air and then let it sit in there for a second and then exhale. Nobody told me to just keep the smoke in my mouth. And I was like, okay, why am I dying? Am I going to die on vacation?
That's a wonderful way to get an upset stomach.
Yeah, no, I learned the hard way, and I was like out for the rest of that evening. But yeah, but that is really cool how much detail goes into cigar play, and how it really does fit into like this daddy aesthetic, which I actually want to talk about. The whole like daddies and this sort of like what it means to be a daddy. So like, I have like, I just turned 31 and I have like gray hairs on my facial hair and my head. And I was like looking in the mirror. I'm like, okay, that's gray. And my friends who are like in their early mid 20s, they're like, oh my God, you're such a daddy now. And I was like, all because I have gray. I mean, I don't know. Am I a daddy? So like, I wanted to talk to you more about like, what exactly does it mean to be a daddy? Like, what is your definition of daddy? Because my definition could be something completely different. Like, it could be just literally having children.
Sure. I mean, I think that is one way to define that, right? That's the vanilla definition. If you are a daddy, you are a father who has children, right? Sure.
Literally.
Yes, in a literal sense, most certainly. Within a, let's call it a kinky sense, it can mean a lot of different things. But I think that what it ultimately tends to boil down to, from like a generalized perspective, is that you're taking on some kind of caregiver role. And that can look like a lot of different things. So I have like a whole class about daddies, like I mentioned before. And in that, what I endeavor to do is sort of take it from almost a macro view of exploring different types of paternal archetypes that exist in our culture. And I'm speaking primarily to the Western culture, since that's my point of view. It differs depending on your point of view, always. And so that can be anything like, you know, even like somebody who's like a teacher or a boss, a role model, helping people reach their potential. That can be kind of like a daddy. You can have more of like a softer caregiver, like a nurturer, a healer, who's, I mean, just think of like a dog dad or a cat dad or a plant dad, right? It's paternal, but in like a very soft, healing, guiding way. It's a different vibe, right? Then you've got like a sugar daddy, okay? Like we might be familiar with that kind of term, right?
Yes, I love them.
Similar to that, we also have more of like just like a doting father, right? Like a doting daddy who just wants to buy everything for you and spoil you and is super devoted to you, whether that's like a sugar daddy dynamic or not, right? That can be kind of different. And then we have things like the disciplinarian, right? So think like the old school, like Catholic conservative military dad, reprimander, very strict. Those kinds of elements can go into somebody who's maybe a little bit more strict with their rules, and strict with their behaviors that they expect, and has that like firmer sort of dad vibe. That can be kind of like a daddy thing. And you can mix and match this stuff, or also just say, I don't care about any of that and I just want to be whatever feels right to me. I don't know. That's fine. But for a starting point, I think that these kinds of examples in our cultures can be helpful to be like, this is the kind of thing that I associate with a paternal figure. How can I use that and like make that sexy ultimately, but also use it in a way that makes me feel valid in myself and makes me feel strong. Like when you think of the word daddy, a lot of people they do think caregiver. They also think hot, but in what way, right? Like this more like masculinized hot, right? They think firm, they think disciplinary, they think tough, they think strong, they think powerful. They also think provider, protector. These are the kinds of roles that you're inhabiting when you tend to take that on. Now, I say that with also the understanding that there are femme daddies out there who are taking all of those sort of traits and then turning them kind of on their head and putting them in an even more feminized, like high femme space than I do, right? Because where I'm coming from is extremely genderqueer as well. So a lot of times it does have that sort of like masculine edge, but you can be wearing all bright baby pink and still be like a high femme daddy. It's more about the energy with which you carry yourself. Okay. But like a nurturing disciplinarian, trainer, protector, provider, those kinds of words come to mind when I think about daddies in this space as well. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
No, for sure. Because now I think we're getting a much clearer picture of what it means to be a daddy. And daddy is very like a state of mind, right? Like I can be a daddy like to my friend group because I'm very much like, you know, if you fuck with one of my friends, I know someone that can make your death look like an accident. Like that's the kind of
absolutely.
Yeah. And the scary thing is I actually do know, but I'm not going to get into that for legal purposes.
There you go, right? It can also be I'm a daddy because I make sure that this house is run, right?
Yeah,
what does that mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've also been on the receiving end of that dynamic. So I've had a couple sugar daddies who, I don't know where they are now. They're probably very old and some are probably buried in the ground for all I can remember. But they were great. I also did have a client who was a literal daddy who was like, he made a request of me because he told me that like, I kind of looked like his actual son. And I was like, okay, hold on. Where is this going? So then what he wanted to do was to like discipline me. So like he had me across his lap and then like, you know, smack me and then proceeded to, and then he wanted to fuck me. So I was like, I don't know what that says about you and your own son, but I'm just here to, you know, help you fulfill your fantasy for the hour, and then I'll be on my merry way. So I hope he has solved that in therapy. But yeah, so I guess the way you explain it makes it clear that like you don't have to be like a certain age to be a daddy, because like you can be kind of like the youngest person in the room and still have that sort of parental energy, and you're like the protector, the disciplinarian, or if you want, you can be like the neglectful alcoholic father.
You sure can. That is extremely risky. I have seen those kinds of dynamics that people do. It's a psychological edge play ultimately to do something like that. When you're going to like a dark place like that, I mean, you're kind of doing role play abuse in a way, and that's intense. That's heavy. That should be given the heaviness that it has. You can do it, but you have to be very mindful about all of the psychological minefields within that, and make sure that you're caring for each other so that it doesn't become actual reality. That's the goal, is to go into those toxic spirals. And any kind of daddy relationship is always going to have some kind of risk of codependency, because you're doing sort of a caregiver relationship a lot of the times, whatever that looks like. And you have to be careful with that in any sort of power exchange dynamic, that it doesn't become too codependent to the point where it's toxic. But especially if you're doing like a neglectful father role play, you got to make sure that you're aware of all the triggers innate in that and all of the behaviors in that. It can be very intense, also rewarding, but very intense.
We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Yes!
Hey, you sick motherfuckers! I've got a special treat for you. Need a new toy to spice up your sex life? Head over to loveshop.ca/sexedwithtim and get yourself a cock ring, a dildo, a vibrator, or even a life-sized sex doll. Damn, I guess love really does come in all shapes and sizes. Get 15% off your entire order when you use code SEXEDWITHTIM at checkout. They're shipping to all of Canada and the United States because North America is horny. That's loveshop.ca/sexedwithtim and use code SEXEDWITHTIM for 15% off your entire purchase. Happy orgasm! Do you like feeling sexy and looking sexy? Of course you do. Only my listeners are sexy as fuck. I have partnered with fetishwear designer Dale Kuda to bring you the hottest deals on custom jockstraps, harnesses, hats, and more. Head over to dalekuda.com, that's DALEKUDA.com, and use code SEXEDWITHTIM at checkout for 25% off the entire store. Yeah, you heard me. 25% off. And cherry on top, free shipping. Oh my god. I have a few of the stuff that he has made for me, and girl, I'm wearing it right now. I'm wearing like a little jockstrap so that I could easily just like slip a little butt plug or dildo every now and then here and there, and I'm on the train, I'm just like, thank you, Dale. That's dalekuda.com with the code SEXEDWITHTIM for 25% off your entire purchase with free shipping. With a deal like that, I swear I could come buckets, honey.
The show is about to begin.
Yes.
You're stepping into a space that's almost blurring the lines between your real life and like what you've created in your imagination. And I like having this conversation with fellow sex workers, because I remember when one of my clients and we engaged in a scene, and oh boy, he started to kind of like develop feelings for me, because I think at that point he was kind of forgetting the boundary that we've established, because things felt like it got too real for him, and then he was sort of like starting to transfer his feelings onto me, and I had to like reestablish those boundaries, even though I didn't really know how to, because I was like 20 something years old, so I'm like, what the fuck do I know about boundaries? So I'm wondering, do you have any sort of similar experiences where like the client has kind of started to forget that this is actually just the scene and this is just a service that I provide?
Certainly. I think that we are, as providers, already existing sort of within a little bit of a gray area, because we are creating, in a way, in some ways, potentially some kind of relationship with these people, regardless of the fact that it happens in a particular container, right? For the hour to 8 hours that you're with me, the connection is there. I'm creating a connection with somebody, and I am taking them to a certain place with me that is a sort of relationship, even though it's not a relationship in the traditional sense. Like, that's not my boyfriend now. But like in that moment, I am the mistress or the daddy or the sir, and this is my boy or slut or sissy or slave or whatever it is. And we're creating that fantasy and, in a way, that relationship within that container for that time. That is a vulnerability. That is a really intense place to go with somebody. And I would never say that that is not valid. But I think it is important to recognize that it exists in that container. That is where that exists. Right? So, yes, I've definitely had that struggle. I've also, actually somewhat recently, I was told by another client who came to see me that a former client that had seen me and then and we had a wonderful time and didn't see me again. I was told by this second client that the previous one was his friend and told him to come and see me because he also wanted to explore a similar thing, but that he wasn't able to see me anymore because he knew he would fall in love with me and he didn't want to go too far. And I was like, but that it was really wonderful in like all these ways that I really appreciated knowing. Honestly, it was lovely to find that out, even if I couldn't find it out from him directly. So yeah, that happens, and I respect that. I think that that's fine. I honestly think that that is a good example of that client knowing his own, or I guess their own boundaries, and honoring them. So I appreciated that. So it definitely happens.
Yeah, it becomes like very blurred for some people because they start to like associate, and I guess they're trying to, at least in my case, I've been hired by clients to help rewrite a memory and change the narrative. So
Yes.
I can tell, right? Like where,
Trauma.
yeah, they reshape this trauma and then they change the narrative to help heal. And then that's where the caretaker side of me is like, that's okay, I'm right here. And then they start to like, I don't want to say violate, but they like overstep a boundary in the sense that like they've kind of reached outside of the container that we've created and then start to like send me messages and gifts and like I wasn't aware that this was part of our dynamic, but I guess we can have this conversation again. But again, what was I supposed to know? I was in my early 20s. I know shit.
Of course. It always depends, too. I mean, and everybody's boundaries are going to be different, especially for different things. Like, I also think it's important for me to say that for most clients that I see regularly in any sort of, regular interval, I do care for them. Like, it is also somewhat of a relationship, even though it is a professional relationship. Like, I do care. Like the feelings that I develop are very particularly complex and specific, but I do care about them. And if they disappear, I'm sad. I don't say things to them that I don't mean, unless it's part of a role play. Then I say things I don't. But if I'm humiliating you, I don't mean it in that way. I still respect you underneath that. So, I'm saying you're a dirty slut from such a place of respect,
I love that. You're such a garbage.
You are such garbage because you like to hear it. But it's important to also say that I do genuinely care about these people. And how do I want to say this? I welcome people sending gifts to me as long as they are appropriate gifts, right?
Yes.
I have a wish list. I have things that I say online that I want. And the most wonderful people in my life will bring them to me. It is very lovely. I appreciate it. And that's not overstepping. I don't know. The most ridiculous thing I could think of is like sending me like a ring, hoping that will be a promise ring.
Oh, boy.
But it's the most extreme example. That would be extremely inappropriate. But there's still quite a relationship that does form. There's quite a relationship of care with certain clients that I see. It's just important for everyone to like understand what that means and what it doesn't mean.
No, for sure. I once had a client who told me that he was thinking of leaving his wife for me.
See, that's too far.
Yeah.
That's a good example of too far.
Yeah. I was like, I'm literally like 21. What am I, a child bride? Like, I can't.
Oh my God. I bet you'd be a great child bride, but maybe not.
I'm like over here with my index fingers touching and then looking up with big, sad puppy eyes. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Sir?
As lovely as that is. Yeah, maybe not, though.
I'm like a little tiny baby, sir. Yeah, I was like, no, thank you. And then I kind of had to like run away from that. So, wherever that guy is, I hope you're happy in your marriage and you didn't end up divorcing her because of me, because you have a literal wife and kids. So I didn't want to get caught up in that trauma. But, this does speak to the fact that this job is emotionally taxing. It is very like we're giving so much of ourselves and we're sharing all the knowledge that we've accrued over the years, and it's very emotionally and psychologically heavy. And how do you, Mistress Wiley Wolfe, like keep yourself fueled, right? How do you keep yourself taken care of in such an emotionally taxing industry?
Absolutely. I think a lot of that comes down to two things, because like you said, and kind of like you're alluding to as well, when we do this kind of work, we are not really receiving typically aftercare from the clients that we engage with. Tops and bottoms need aftercare. So we don't get that. we see each other and then we part ways. So it comes down to two things. It comes down to both self-care and community care. For self-care, you have to know how to take care of yourself. What do you need after you engage with somebody or engage with a client in particular? Do you need some time alone? Do you cozy up with some tea and a good book or a movie? Do you need to go pet your cats or dogs that you have at home? Like, what do you need for yourself? Do you treat yourself to a spa day, take a bath, right? What helps you ground and come back into yourself afterwards and feel some sort of self-love? That's one thing. And that can look like more than that, but it depends on the person. Do you go exercise? There's a lot of different things it can be. The community care part is, I think that it's easy to feel quite isolated in this kind of work. And that's why it is even more important to have a community of friends and, in some cases, chosen family around you who understand and are sympathetic and sometimes even, truly understanding in that they too are in this work. And I think that it's, in fact, quite important to have friends who are also in this work, at least one, if not more. Building that community around you becomes so essential because you have people to go to, you have people to talk to, you have people that you can say, hey, I'm about to see this client and I think that it's going to take a lot out of me. Would you be willing to hang out with me afterwards and talk me through it, or even give me some cuddles since I'm not going to get that? Being able to reach out to people becomes so important so that we don't feel so alone and so that we can kind of almost surrogate aftercare ourselves in a way.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. I like that, like I said earlier, we're kind of cut from the same cloth. So it's very important that we surround ourselves with the people who kind of know what we're going through and where we're coming from, so that I don't have to explain the nuances and the whole
that's not what you need right there. That's not what you're needing when you've just gone through something or you're just feeling a little low. You don't need to be educating at that moment.
Yeah. Right? Which is why I had to bounce around until I found the right therapist for me. I don't want to have to explain what grinder is every single time.
Yes. If you can, having a kink positive, if you're polyamorous positive, and queer therapist is the best. Hard to find.
Oh, yeah.
But it's so important if you can.
Yeah. It's it really does just keep your brain and your sanity at a proper level, especially when you engage in kink as your job. I'm also wondering, Mistress Wiley Wolfe, so we were talking about daddies a little bit. What is your daddy aesthetic?
Well, lots of leather, definitely.
Oh, I love leather. I want to talk about leather.
Yeah, we could talk about leather. I love leather. I've been becoming more increasingly involved in my local leather community and little toe steps and such. So I'm coming into that identification. But for me, I am absolutely I'm a little bit of everything I said. I try to combine all things the best I can as sort of more of a nurturing disciplinarian. That really is how I identify. Yes, I'm very protective. I love to train someone to my exact liking and my exact needs. I think that that's very nice, while also providing for them and nurturing them to be their best self, and then some disciplinarian things when that's necessary.
That's hot. I remember one Pride where I saw this handler with his pup, and the handler had a very cool aesthetic where he was decked out in all leather, and all that leather was pink. I was like, I want this. I want this. My favorite color is pink. Everything I own, or almost everything I own, is pink. And to be donned in all pink leather, pink leather cap, chaps.
Amazing. We love that.
Yeah, right. So I was like, this is if Legally Blonde met 50 Shades of Grey or something. And this is, I want this aesthetic. So leather, let's talk about it a little bit. I love the feeling of leather on my skin. I have a leather tie. I have leather harnesses. Oh God, I don't even know what kind of other leather I have. Just a bunch of harnesses and like accessories. What's like your leather wardrobe looking like?
Oh gosh, I do have quite a growing wardrobe at this point. I've got leather corsets. I've got a couple leather harnesses. I genuinely need more. Got leather suspenders. I keep trying to find leather pants, but it is difficult for my body, I guess. I do have some leather chaps I just got though, and I love those. I've got a couple leather vests. I've got a leather cowboy hat. I've got a couple different ones for like that whole outfit. My leather boots, of course. I've got my go-to leather item that I wear everywhere I go and is also really connected to my daddy self are my leather gloves. Now those are like leather motorcycle gloves, so they're cut off at the fingers. And I don't know, I've talked to a lot of people who have, like a particular piece of gear that really connects them to like how they identify. And for me, it's those gloves. As soon as I put them on, I feel complete and centered in myself. I feel like hot daddy. It's great. So I have those. I've got a leather cover, so a leather like a traditional leather cap that was given to me by two of my submissives when they felt that I had earned it, which was very important to me in honor of as in like a play on honoring traditional old guard leather protocol of being basically bestowed upon yourself by the community, like your cover and your cap, or by your mentor when they felt that you had earned it. Some people in the community had told me that I earned it, but I wanted to leave it to the people in my care to give that to me when they felt that I did deserve it. And so I have it, and it's very special to me. Let's see what else. Oh, I have a leather jumpsuit. I love that thing. That is my favorite.
Oh, lovely. What do you think is the appeal of leather and with its association in kink?
Well, I think that is a little bit of a two-part question because, leather as a connection to kink it's our history, kink history is leather history. We came from, the old motorcycle bars and the
yeah, we did.
That came from that, the gay leather community that came out of that, right? Coming from, the military, and then they came back, became motorcycle gangs, or not gangs, but groups. And then we built that from there, right? We came from the gay leather community. So there is sort of a historical context there that is extremely important. And that was, of course, perpetuated by figures such as Tom of Finland's and all those drawings, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. That is your quintessential leather daddy. If you really want to know where the aesthetic inspiration comes from, that's the amalgamation of everything that was happening at that time that we've then taken and run with ultimately ever since. And it's kind of like a hyper masculinization there as well. So it comes from our history, and it comes from sort of how we came into kink as people. So that's part of it, right? There is a connection to BDSM's very origins in a lot of ways, or at least one segment and like the primary origin in that way. And then, of course, there's also just that it feels really nice.
It does.
The smell, the sensation.
It's like a hug.
It is like a hug. The warmth of that can be really, really nice. The durability of it is wonderful when you compare leather to something like latex, which I also love, but is less easily wearable in different scenarios, right? And also wears down over time quicker. If you get a nice, good quality leather piece and care for it well, it can last you nearly a lifetime, probably more, depending on the quality of it. So that definitely can be a wonderful thing about it. Just the process of that care. We have boot blacks at leather bars who are caring for leather, right? And you can learn to do that. That can be part of community care. That can be also just part of like your ritual of caring for your gear and conditioning and cleaning your leather in all of the specific ways that we've passed down over generations. That's a lot of fun. Also just looks really hot, There can be something primal about it too. You are wearing skin. That for some people that comes into it, right? Where you're wearing the hide of an animal and you can kind of connect to yourself in that way. All kinds of things, And I'm sure there's more that I didn't mention.
I feel so
Yes. Definitely.
butch. Like when it comes to leather, the moment I wear it, I kind of feel like Cruella de Vil and Dalmatians, you know? And actually, speaking of Cruella de Vil, I kind of have like that really long cigarette holder.
I've got one of those too. I love
Isn't
those.
it so hot? And like this goes into like the whole cigar play aesthetic of it all, but something just happens to me when I hold that really long cigarette holder, and then I just become like a bitch, like
That's an
very.
attitude.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. Because I become like high femme. I'm like, oh, I'm serving cunt, and just like, don't talk to me unless I
Definitely.
ask you to.
The cigarette holder versus the cigar is almost a gendered discussion.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
like
close put into it. And it's just an energy gender thing. When I say that, I'm not talking about you can only use a cigarette holder if you are a certain or you identify as a certain gender. Like, that's not what I mean, but it is energetically different. It's
oh yeah,
interesting.
like honestly, I love when I get in tune with my femininity, especially when it comes to like kinky stuff. So like I do have a drag persona. Her name is Ava Gina.
Oh
And
my gosh, perfect.
and you know, every now and then she'll come out during play and cigarette holder in hand. And then I also have like my 6-inch heels and their stilettos. And some guys love the feel of the stilettos scratching their back, stepping on
Oh
their
yeah.
ass. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just so like, I don't know, I get to escape reality a little bit and tune into this certain character, and it just gives me like freedom to express myself in the bedroom, and it's just so liberating.
Isn't that wonderful? And it's amazing how just a couple props can really do that for you in a lot of ways. Dressing the part has so much to do with the way that we're seeing ourselves and the way that we're engaging with ourselves and other people. Like just pop a cigarette holder in your hand and some 6-inch heels, and now you're a prime feminine high femme bitch. Like we love
Yeah.
that. You
I'm like,
know?
whatever is the polar opposite of sissification, you know, like
Yeah. Well,
what do you call
so it's not quite booification. That's sort of a different
no.
thing.
I'm more of like CEO, you know, a very like Miranda Priestley, Anna Wintour kind of like bitch in the bedroom.
I love that for you. I think that that's great.
Thank you. I'm planning on making her public sometime soon once I get a drag mother.
Uh,
Yeah,
I look forward to seeing that. That sounds fabulous.
a vagina fully personified. Please welcome to the stage, a vagina. Just a full on vulva coming onto the stage. Oh my
There you
god.
go. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Well, to my dearest chlamydiates, you've made it this far into this chaotic ass conversation. We are now coming to the end. I know, just like any scene, it does need to have a close, a safe word. My safe word is don't stop. Uh, but I wanted to thank Mistress Wiley Wolfe for joining me here on Sex Ed with Tim. Do you have any sort of parting words of wisdom for our chlamydiates out there, Mistress?
Be yourselves and be dirty.
So short, sweet, and simple. Just be yourself and be dirty. And also, everyone out there, don't forget to masturbate. Masturbate lots. It's good for you, and then you also know what you like. So, Mistress Wiley Wolfe, do you have anything for the audience to find? Can you please make like a butt and plug away what you would want the audience to look at?
Absolutely. Well, I think the best place to go for anyone is just going to be my website. So spelling that, it will be worship, WILEYWOLFE.com. So that's worship Wiley Wolfe with an E at the end.com. And that's going to have my links to everything, ultimately. Links to my Instagram, links to my Twitter, where the dirtier stuff is. You'll be able to contact me via my Sext Panther if you're interested in spicy, saucy texting videos or calls, all kinds of things. You'll see my classes coming up. You'll see my performances coming up. You'll be able to engage with all the different groups that I run. You'll be able to even listen to other podcasts that I've done. Everything is on the website, so I just recommend going there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mistress Wiley Wolfe, for all of your knowledge and all of the things that you do for the fellow Kinksters out there. And if you missed any of that, my chlamydiots, I'm going to put all of that in the show notes so you don't miss a single thing. And please, while you're here, do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe, because you are supporting sex educator content, queer content. And you know what? If you don't give us the 5 stars or a rating, you're a racist, you're homophobic, you're a misogynist. And that's on you, okay? I don't make the rules. So if you don't leave that very sweet 5-star rating, you're going to go to hell. But in all seriousness, thank you so much, my dear chlamydias, for listening to another episode of this